What exactly is happening inside Balochistan? The Pakistan army has made several claims that the Baloch Liberation Army that recently hijacked a moving passenger train has challenged. The Balochistan Liberation Army, as well as prominent Baloch activists, have said that the Pakistan army is misleading its own people. I'm Barkha Dutt, you're with the Mojo Story. On the program today, we return our focus to the truth of Balochistan. For the last few days, we have seen several headlines with the Baloch Liberation Army that wants a separate Balochistan, making claims about new attacks that it has launched against the Pakistan military, including attacking a Pakistani military convoy. Like before, the claims between the BLA and the Pakistan army vary enormously. The BLA says that the Pakistan army has not told the people of Pakistan the truth about what actually happened in Balochistan. In the meantime, there are reports that 3 universities in Balochistan have shut down. There are mainstream Balochistan politicians like Akhtar Mengal who gave us an interview saying that Pakistan was losing its grip over Balochistan. And several strategic affairs experts are now arguing that China, which has several key infrastructure projects in the region, could now look at deploying its own troops in Balochistan. To talk about the truth of Balochistan, to take us inside what is actually happening, to separate fact from fiction, I want to welcome to the program now one of Pakistan's most respected journalists, broadcasters. He runs his own YouTube platform, which you must check out. Wajahat Khan is with us. Wajahat, thank you. You helped us break this news when it first hit the headlines. It's been several days since that conversation. We've had some time to let the dust settle. What do we know about the truth of what happened on that train? Because the Baloch Liberation Army says the Pakistan army is lying. The BLA, okay, even if you ignore, mainstream politicians of Balochistan are saying that Pakistan's government is not telling its people the truth. What is the truth?
Hi, Barkha. Always good to be here. You're one of the few Indian journalists who gets the Pakistan story and keeps it alive in a balanced way. Thanks for giving me this opportunity. We did break that story that morning, but since then, it's been about a week. Since then, well, it's the same old, with this dystopian version of the events from the military, which obviously didn't take much time to blame the Afghans and then, of course, you guys, the Indians, for all that's wrong in Balochistan. And then, of course, on the other side of the tracks, to use a very bloody pun, is the Baloch insurgent media machine, which keeps on giving us snippets and details which cannot be accounted for or answered for. Just a few hours ago, I'm not sure if this has caught your attention, there's been unmarked graves in Quetta with the same very coffins that you reported on that morning on your media. All across your country. Those coffins have turned up in unmarked graves, which don't tally exactly with the official death toll, according to the Pakistani military authorities. Now, I just want to make something very clear for your audiences. Of late, there was an old saying that, especially in the army, that what happens in Balochistan stays in Balochistan. It's so vast, it's so sparse. It's so rugged, it's so difficult to get to, it's so difficult to get out of, it's so difficult to navigate and so difficult to understand and communicate with that for decades, Barkha, the Balochistan story hasn't really been told. There's been 3 surges, spurts of insurgencies rather, in the 50s and the 70s, and then this one, which is now almost in its 20th year. There's thousands of missing persons there. A lot of hardline Indian activists or Indian hawks, rather, sometimes compare Balochistan to the Kashmir problem. Well, they're different problems, really, but you can see the same allegations which go against the Indian state there, against the Pakistani state here. Now, this really takes the feet out of the Pakistani government because, for example, there's 7,000 missing people in Balochistan, unaccounted for. According to who? Not the Indians, not the Afghans, not the Martians, but the official commissions set up by the Pakistanis themselves. So on that. The whole what happens in Balochistan stays in Balochistan story has gone because now digitization, social media, all these young reporters reporting online, giving us facts. This new generation of especially women who are now activists from that region have surged to compete neck to neck, eyeball to eyeball with the media machine that is the Pakistani military media machine. And it's a complicated story to tell.
Now, I have a comment and a question. On the parallel that you say some liken to the Jammu and Kashmir situation in India. One, the J&K situation in India has vastly evolved, right? With the abrogation of Article 370 that gave Jammu and Kashmir a special status within the Indian Union. We're seeing and I've reported on J&K for 30 years, as long as I've been a reporter. We're seeing a very, very different situation in Jammu and Kashmir, where not just as I would argue that the security situation has improved enormously. We've seen massive participation in the recently held elections, both in the assembly and the state. And what is interesting is that Pakistan had taken a position that they would not resume dialogue with India till this was reversed, and clearly it's not going to be reversed. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens between Pakistan and India, given that position. But I am more interested, because we can do a separate whole discussion on J&K, to bring the focus back on Balochistan. You spoke about unmarked graves. Now, I want you to expound a little bit on what you know about this. The context, of course, is the BLA takes the train hijack. It claims it lets the civilians go. It claims that it has military personnel in its captivity. And now there is a suggestion that these unmarked graves could be the coffins of some of these Pakistani military personnel who were unaccounted for. The Pakistan army, by contrast, says it rescued the civilians. They weren't released by the BLA, and that everybody has been accounted for. And in fact, it's been a successful operation. What do we know, given these two varying claims? What do we know about these unmarked graves?
So here's what we know, that there were roughly over 400 passengers on the passenger manifest of the Pakistan Railways Jafar Express the morning when it took off from that station at 9 a.m. We know that 4 hours later, it was intercepted 100 miles outside Quetta, near the famous Bolan Pass. And then we know that the Baloch insurgents who took over it basically divided the passengers into two groups: one, women, children, and the elderly, and Baloch citizens, making this clearly a case of ethnic warfare as well. They were let go off in droves. Not all of them, some of them. Some were still kept on the train. We also know that there was a remarkable number of military personnel, an abnormal, extraordinary number of military personnel. It's Ramzan in Pakistan. People take time off to travel, spend time with their families for Eid. But the very fact that there were at least there were contingents from 2 infantry divisions, marking at least over 100 military personnel. This was not a regular Jafar Express which leaves at any given day at 9 a.m. That makes this a very interesting insider attack. These guys knew that there's going to be a heavy contingent of Fajis, of soldiers, on this train. That makes it a very interesting inside piece of intelligence that the Baloch insurgents had. Anyhow, long story short, there's almost a 24 to 36 hour face-off where gunships are used, drones are deployed, special forces are used, snipers are deployed. At the end of the day, both sides came out declaring victory. However, the Pakistani military side, the numbers that it claimed, that roughly 21 people were killed, 4 soldiers were lost, 33 insurgents were killed, 21 citizens. It doesn't clarify whether these citizens are regular civilians or these hostages are regular civilians or soldiers. It doesn't clarify that. There's also been a remarkable lack of optics. Usually the janazas, the funerals of Pakistan Army soldiers are widely held and broadcast. This time we haven't seen any military funerals, which is strange because there's been news of military personnel killed, but those famous military funerals, which are broadcast live on TV with the namaz-e janaza and everything, have been missing. So that's the Pakistani side. And by the way, there's an 80 to 100% gap in the manifest and the number of people who have claimed to be rescued. So that's strange. So the math is fuzzy on the Pakistan Army side. But the math is also fuzzy on the BLA side. The BLA has been eerily quiet. It has, of course, declared victory by being able to do this, disrupt a major train line, take on the mighty Pakistan Army, fight them off for several hours, etc., etc. But then it's really gone quiet. If it did have all these hostages, like it claimed it did, 80 to 100 hostages in those initial tweets that you and I were tracking that morning, well, where are those 80 to 100 guys? You can't just make them disappear. At this point, the BLA propaganda would have kicked in. At this point, we would have seen what these hostages are up to. Now, there's a third terrible possibility that there's neither side is right, and there have been huge losses on both sides, and they're trying to cover the tracks and lick their wounds.
That might explain the unmarked graves.
That explains the unmarked graves partially, which have turned up in the middle of Quetta, incidentally my hometown, but in the middle of Quetta in a graveyard. And now Baloch activists who have on the sidelines for years now been advocating for justice for their own missing persons, their own brothers and sons and fathers who may or may not have been perhaps associated with the insurgency, but they have gone missing. And now they're literally people of Balochistan in Quetta are digging people out, digging the corpses out of these graves, trying to do DNA tests on their own because they do not trust the state when it says that these are terrorists or these are not the people who are not on those missing persons list. There's two stories conjoining here. But for your audiences, rest assured, these are the talking points. This is the longest, now officially, the longest running insurgency in this part of South Asia. And these guys, the BLA, I would say, I was talking to an intelligence analyst here in Washington. He was saying that these guys have LTT level, Tamil Tiger level sophistication now. They've got a media arm, they've got women suicide bombers, they've got a lot of people supporting them, they've got international backing. They're not the Baloch insurgents who used to fight from the mountains and run off. Not at all. These guys can take over entire small towns for a period of 18 to 24 hours, run havoc, run amok, take over police stations, burn banks, loot them, make videos, have fun, and walk back. There's at least 7 districts, as we discussed last time. There's at least 7 whole districts, Barkha, in Balochistan, which have no control of the state, according to Pakistani politicians. So things aren't very good in this huge, important province, which, by the way, is around 45% of Pakistan is Balochistan. You can take the other 3 provinces and literally like put them into this province. That's how big it is.
So the former chief minister of Balochistan, Sardar Akhtar Mengal, who quit his position in the Pakistan National Assembly as parliamentarian in protest against the state policy in Balochistan, he, in an interview to me, said that he was today willing to be called a traitor to Pakistan, but not a traitor to Baloch people. He said it wasn't in his capacity to steer events, but that the next generation of men and women involved in this, you can call it insurgency, you can call it separatist movement. From their point of view, it's an Azadi movement, whatever nomenclature you want to use. He actually suggested that there was danger of the Pakistani state losing grip over Balochistan. Fazlur Rahman mentioned those 7 districts, another Pakistan MP in the assembly, that there are at least 5 to 7 districts of Balochistan where the state doesn't have control. The Pakistan military is expected to, in the interim, respond with greater ferocity, right, in its crackdowns. Do you believe that Pakistan will and can retain control over Balochistan? Or do you feel it's too far gone? Or is that too big a question for us to be able to answer?
I think Balochistan is too big of a province to be governed in any aspect normally. Listen, there's around 1,000-kilometer border with Iran. There's another 1,000 clicks with the Afghans, right? These are not 2 normal countries. The Western Iran, come on, one of the most complicated parts of one of the most complicated countries in the world. And then southern Afghanistan, for God's sake, 35 NATO alliance militaries couldn't defeat these guys. And what you have is those 2 very porous borders. You've got another 1,000 clicks of the Makran coast, which is the smuggling hub of this region. anything and everything goes past there. That's a whole Netflix series which needs to be made.
Mm.
And then, of course, in all of this, Balochistan's internal position is the only province which touches all three provinces. It's the only province which is sitting on billions in deposits of what I mean, what isn't there?
Mm.
Ports. There's the promise of Gwadar. They say there's all sorts of minerals. There's gas. Of course, Pakistan's whole petroleum reserves, the little that they have there, everything and anything. The biggest copper mine in the world. So there's a lot which is vested in Balochistan because of what's under there. The problem is not what's under there. The problem is what's over there. The people have a very, very limited share of the national wealth, of the national polity, of the national vote, of the national hak, as they say. There are no rights of these. And plus, there are a small, very small number of people. The capital city, Quetta, is the 10th largest city in Pakistan. So it doesn't even figure into a major city in the rest of the country. And yet, the plight of the Baloch people is so long. It's been running since the 50s, and it's evolved as an insurgency in such a way that now it's become an international issue. The Chinese are a target. The Indians are a part of the narrative. The UAE and the Saudis are invested in it. They're trying to break in. They want all those mines and all those minerals under there. So it's an interesting part of the country where the locals are not with you, but the rest of the planet wants in. And here you are with very little confidence from the locals. And here's the Pakistani army trying to mine its way out of the province. But really, local support, without local support, they won't be able to manage this.
So the question of local support takes us to the question of China, right? The big question now is that whatever be the truth of how many casualties there were on either side when the BLA takes this train hostage, the BLA has shown capacity. And as you said, this is now being likened to the LTTE. There's a certain degree of, military grade training that you are now seeing in what the BLA is doing, and hence it calls itself an army. The question now is that what is the impact on CPEC, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor? What is the impact on the Gwadar Port, which is in Balochistan? In the past, 2 Chinese nationals have been targeted by the BLA and been killed. Does China at this point say, hang on, Pakistan, your army is not enough. We need our own troops on the ground?
That's an excellent question. The trajectory of the BLA and CPEC have literally been the opposite. Like they intersect somewhere around 10 years ago when the Chinese said that they were interested in building CPEC through Balochistan, because you have to, the magic happens in Balochistan, right? The minerals, the ports, the roads, everything has to go through Balochistan. So there was really a lot of eyes on what would happen in Balochistan. But that capacity building, as I've explained before, couldn't happen because, well, there was not a lot of local buy-in. Now, why does the BLA differ from the other insurgencies in the neighborhood? They are not Islamists like the Taliban, like the Pakistani Taliban, the TTP. They don't want to institute Sharia. They're not interested in shutting women up or setting up a mosque around every corner. In fact, women fight in their ranks. In fact, they're the only insurgent group in the country which deploys women suicide bombers. They're very pro-women, by the way. It's quite interesting to see. They're very, very secular in that sense. They also run by a very different class of Baloch. These are middle-class, educated college students, lawyers, doctors are in this insurgency. It's quite strange to see that they're very well spoken. The English, which is a yardstick of education in the subcontinent, unfortunately, you are still judged by the level of English that you speak, depending on how bilingual you are. They're quite bilingual, these guys, trilingual at times. So premised on that, the BLA, the very genetics of the BLA, and then it's very clear case for being very anti-China. Every time it attacks the Pakistani state, it also warns the Chinese. It says, listen, we've taught these guys a lesson, we're going to teach you a lesson as well. And it's also been very brazen about being very direct with the Chinese. It's hit the Chinese in Balochistan. It's hit the Chinese in Karachi as well, which is the largest city in the country. And it's been very clear, very black and white, that the Chinese cannot and will not be tolerated for exploiting the wealth of Balochistan. Now, It's a little more complicated. The Chinese have done good work over the years in Pakistan. But again, the exploitative Punjab, the largest province, that gets most of the lion's share. Islamabad chews up most of what the Chinese bring in. The Baloch on the ground get very, very little. According to one estimate, 2% of the any given contract's wealth goes to the locals of any given CPEC project on the ground in Balochistan. That's unacceptable, Barkha. That's unacceptable. And that's where the math doesn't make sense. So you've got a secular insurgency which has clear international ambitions to not just drive itself away from this Pakistani project, but also the Chinese project. And that's why CPEC, to answer your question finally, CPEC is dead in the water. It's 10 years old now. They just launched CPEC 2.0. Shahbaz Sharif was there last year. Asim Zardari was there 3 weeks ago. They're literally calling it CPEC 2.0. And you know when you get a 2.0, when 1.0 doesn't work. Otherwise, you don't need a 2.0. So 10 years later, they've launched a 2.0. But the Chinese are very, very wary and are not investing a lot because they need guarantees from the Pakistani military. And they've invested in literal brigades, which have been raised and stationed in Balochistan, the 440, for example. And these brigades have failed. And these brigades, by the way, have literally been paid for by the Chinese to the Pakistan army. And because the army's failed and its other paramilitary contingents have failed, now there are these unconfirmed reports. Beijing will not officially verify them. Islamabad will not officially verify them, but there are unconfirmed reports that the Chinese are saying, listen, guys, if you can't do this, let the PLA
let
come.
us do it.
Yeah. And that would be something. The PLA on the ground in Balochistan. Oh my God, what's next? So Amitabh Bachchan and Amar Akbar Anthony. I'd rather stake the chances of that happening more again in the remake than this.
Yeah. So that takes me to my final question. What has all of this done to the authority of the Pakistan military? And I ask this with some sense of history. You remember when the Americans come in and they take out Osama bin Laden. For a brief period, the civilian politicians of Pakistan think that they have a chance at reasserting control because the military's authority has been undermined. Yusuf Gilani then famously stands up in Pakistan's parliament and calls the ISI a state within a state. Whatever, that doesn't last very long. The Pakistan military is able to re-entrench itself as really the most powerful institution of Pakistan. Right now, what has this done to the authority of the Pakistan military? Is there any pushback at all from the civilian space? What is happening to that dynamic, given that Imran Khan, we haven't spoken about that, given that Imran Khan is still in prison? And the day that I saw this hijack, some of the most critical voices of the Pakistan army were from supporters of Imran Khan on social media and so on. So what's happening to that dynamic?
That's a very good question. That's a good one to wrap things up on. So Khan is the elephant which is not in the room because it's in the jail, right? It's it's not here because it's but that makes him even more important. So what you're seeing right now is that Pakistan's largest political party, the PTI, slowly becoming the standard bearer of all these causes, which it traditionally didn't really stand for. It was just another center-right party aligned with most of the things that center-right parties align with. Balochistan was really nothing Imran has ever weighed in on much. Imran, in fact, has more statements on the record about Afghanistan and the Taliban. He's more concerned about another country than his own, because Balochistan is, as we mentioned earlier, it's a little tricky to comment on Balochistan because what happens in Balochistan stays in Balochistan, and you let the military take care of things. But now, because things are so brazen and so polarized, and people are so pretty much so divided about pretty much anything about when it comes to the army, this is becoming yet another problem that the army has to deal with. So slowly, you're seeing these blocks of politics. The Baloch bloc is not Imran will not necessarily be voted into Balochistan tomorrow, but you are seeing that the voices which are advocating for Balochistan from the mainland of Pakistan include the same parties, the same people, the same advocates and activists who are aligned with the return and the party of Imran Khan. Now, where does that leave the actual government?
Yeah.
You know the Sharifs rather well. Well, I haven't seen the Sharifs. The Sharifs are pretty Machiavellian politicians. At this point, I would have seen them, do something, maybe try to make some space for themselves. But really, the Sharifs don't have a choice except to fall in line with this very powerful army general. And that's the other side of the story that we're kind of missing. Asim Munir has really put the Sharifs, the Zardari Bhuttos, Khan, and pretty much everybody else in their place because of the sort of laws that he has managed to bulldoze through parliament. He had 3 years in office. First, he got a 5-year extension. Then he's stacked on another 5 years. This man will be with us, Barkha, till 2032.
So is he the next Musharraf?
Yeah, I think he's the Musharraf wasn't Musharraf wasn't ruling with the sort of edict this man is. Musharraf didn't have a constitutional clause saying he's going to stick around for 10 years. Musharraf was doing most things illegally, some things semi-legally, and needed thus that semblance of political cover and needed to work with the civilians. This guy doesn't need to work with anyone. He's actually managed to bulldoze a constitutional cover saying he's going to be around, like it or not, for 10 years. Now, whether Shahbaz Sharif is around, Nawaz Sharif is around, Zardari is around, his son is around, Imran is around, or Jemima Khan makes a return from the west of London, it's irrelevant. It's irrelevant because Asim Munir with us for 10 years. And that has really made the system very static. So everybody is in status quo right now. The Khan's party is scared, but still making any noise it can make.
Yeah.
The mainstream parties, establishment parties are behaving themselves. And of course, everybody else is either frustrated or fighting. In this case, the Baloch are really taking the cake and taking the fight rather to the Pakistani military. So it's quite a terrible state.
Yeah, thank you for helping us make sense of it. As ever, Wajahat Khan, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Wajahat Khan, we always turn to him to understand what's happening in Pakistan, but he does run his own platform. I have had the pleasure of being on it from time to time. Do check out his YouTube channel if you haven't already. We'll in fact make sure to link to it in the description below, so you can have a look. Thank you, Wajahat, and we let you go and get some rest now. It's night in New York where you are. Take care and see you soon.
Thank you, and I must have you on my channel soon. I want to discuss this new Indian movie about Aurangzeb. What the big deal is with those?
So we'll talk about it one of these days soon. Take care. See you soon. Bye bye. Bye bye.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Wajahat Story.